This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good morning, this is Freda Liu. It's Raise Your Game. We have Professor Mushtaq Al-Atabi here with us, and of course he's come on before and he's written a book called Think Like an Engineer, and so this is our series around it. And today we're going to it's very interesting and educational. We're talking about the structure of the human brain and how we can use language to rewire our brains. Before we get into that, maybe a brief recap of your book, Think Like an Engineer. What's the book about and the reason you wrote it?
Yes, Freda, thank you very much. The book is called Think Like an Engineer, and the reason I have written it is mainly to share the thinking process that engineers use to solve challenges and create new products and services. And it's hoped to be used both by educators in general, students, but also by parents and business leaders. So in a nutshell, it provides a process for how can we think differently, how can we think systematically and effectively.
Okay, so and the first thing we want to talk about is to understand the brain, right?
Yes.
Okay, so why do we need to understand the brain and what's in the brain?
Well, the brain is a very interesting part of the body. As a matter of fact, it is...
We wouldn't be having this conversation otherwise.
That's right. It's the final frontier.
Okay.
We've understood so many things, but the brain still, in many parts of it, a mystery. We can make computers now that are 1,000 times faster than the brain. We can make computers that have huge memory, yet our computers are still struggling with the things that any child could do very, very easily. So currently, one of the grand challenges for engineering is actually to reverse engineer the human brain. And also, the human brain is the part that we spend 20% of our energy and oxygen on, although it only represents 2% of the body because of its importance. Yet, as educators, for example, I doubt that we fully understand it. So you just imagine that if both teachers and learners know more about how the brain works, what its structure, and how it's designed, isn't that going to make us more effective teachers and learners? So that's really the reason why I think studying the brain is extremely important.
Okay, a little bit about the brain. You know, I was just looking at your notes here, how the brain has three parts. A little bit about understanding the brain.
Yes. So if you look at a human brain, it has three main structures. So let me give you a mental image for you to understand. Imagine that you have an ice cream cone and you've put the first scoop of ice cream inside. This part is called the old brain, also called the reptilian brain.
Right.
And the reason why we call it the old brain or the reptilian brain, because we share this with the reptiles. And that part is where we process things that related to survival, right? The second part, imagine that you are putting another scoop of ice cream on top of this. So the second one is called the middle brain. And this is something that we share with more intelligent animals, elephants, dolphins, and things like that. And that part also, it processes emotions and checks whether things are good for us, how are we feeling now, and things like that. The last part, the third scoop, is what we call the neocortex. And this is something that only humans have as a very developed kind of part of the brain. So imagine now a stimuli that coming through your body. Imagine that you've heard something, or imagine that someone has touched you. The signal will go through the ice cream cone, which is your spinal cord.
Right.
First, it will go through the old brain, the reptilian brain. And that brain just asks one simple question. Is this dangerous?
Okay.
So if the answer is yes, this is dangerous,
Okay.
then run. Yes.
Okay.
So that brain won't allow the signal to go elsewhere. It will take decision there and say, so if, for example, if we hear an explosion or someone is hitting us, trying to punch us or attack us with a knife, then we will either run away or attack them back, or we do an action of that nature. Now, if we go to the second part, which is the middle brain, we will just see, is this thing going well? Am I being respected here? Is my needs taken care of? So this is really the emotional part.
Right.
Now, only when it goes through the old brain, the middle brain, a thought or a stimuli goes to the neocortex.
Right.
I would like to spend, if you don't mind, a little bit of time speaking about the neocortex. So the neocortex is rather thin layer of the brain. Imagine if you take 6 business cards, you stack them on top of each other, you have a look at that. That's actually roughly the thickness of the neocortex.
Oh.
And it is in 6 layers in humans. Now, if you open this up, it will cover the area of maybe a small dining table. And most of the thought processes that takes place that makes us human, this is the part where happens in the neocortex. This is the part where we process mathematics, language, and philosophy, and higher order thoughts.
Okay, so I know you got this idea about this thing called thinking templates, right? And that is something that we develop over a lifetime. We'll discuss that in just a moment. I'm here with Professor Mushtaq Al-Atabi talking about his book, Think Like an Engineer. Stay tuned to Race Again, BFM 89.9.
Best for money. BFM 89.9.
This is Race Again on Enterprise. Good morning. This is Freda Liu. I'm here with Professor Mushtaq Al-Atabi. We've got a series called Think Like an Engineer. And today we're talking about the structure of the human brain and how we can use language to rewire our brains. So earlier on, we were doing a little bit of a study around the brain. And, one of the things that you actually talk about in the book is thinking templates, right? And how that's important for us. What are these thinking templates?
I mentioned that although we have made computers that are much faster, much more powerful, so-called, compared to our brains, but our brains still do things much faster and better than the computers. One of the things that we are still superior to computers at is facial recognition or image recognition. We could, in a split second, see a person or a thing, and we recognize that this is a person, and this is a fridge, and this is a cup. And the way that this thing happens is because the brain thinks in patterns and recognizes chunks of information. So, for example, everyone of our listeners probably would think that he or she knows the alphabet. But you don't know the alphabet letter by letter. You know them as a chunk of letters.
Right.
And to prove this, if I ask you to recite the alphabets, you will just say A, B, C, D, E, F,
right.
whatever. But if you try while you are listening to us, try to recite them backwards. That's much more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because your brain has actually stacked them in that way. So putting things in templates makes thinking extremely quick. We could do things very, very quickly, much, much more quicker than a computer. That's why we say that the human brain is a machine to make sense out of the world through recognizing chunks of information together. So every time I see 2 eyes and a nose, I know that this is a person very quickly. Yeah.
Without any furs, it's not a dog.
This is actually one of the biggest challenges in computer science.
Right.
How to tell the difference between a dog and a cat, for example. So this sounds like something very easy for us, but for a computer, because both have 4 legs, a tail, a head, it's actually quite difficult for a computer to tell the difference between a dog and a cat.
Okay, and then so the thing with these thinking templates is that it leads to stereotyping, and that is good and yet also not so good.
Exactly right. You see, stereotyping as a word has a negative connotation, and there are a lot of people who are saying we should stop stereotyping. Well, the good news or bad news is you can't stop stereotyping, because this is the way the brain works.
Okay.
The brain stereotypes things and say these are fridges, and these are computers, and these are people, and through that we can do mental processing extremely quickly. Now, the dark side of this is when we start having the negative stereotypes, like we're saying people of a certain background are superior to others, and this has led through history to wars and very, very bad things. So the only way that we could counterbalance that quickness in action that is the brain is built for is to build skepticism into our education system. And this is something that's, interestingly, the brain is also capable of, but need to be trained to do so.
So skepticism, and I guess, and that's to always question, but not to be cynical, right? There's a big difference there.
Definitely. I guess it sits on a continuum, but we need to be always emotionally intelligent, which is, I think, something maybe we are going to talk about in one of the sessions. So the brain has to balance so many things at the same time: how to use the useful templates and how to break the unuseful or non-useful templates. So that balance is probably what we call emotional intelligence in one dimension.
Okay,
of it.
so when we're skeptical, we're always questioning the status quo in the workplace, the way things are always done. So that's why we need to be skeptical.
Yes, and people who are skeptical have always been behind all the advancement that has happened in science, in politics, in social sciences, and in everything around us.
So how do we be skeptical? There's a process for this as well.
Well, we need to be aware of
Okay.
that not all the templates that we have are useful. So we need to question them. So if I pick something from the history of science, for example, humans used to think that Earth is flat. And everywhere you look, Earth looks really flat to you. We need to find a mental model or a thinking template for Earth. So we thought that Earth was a disk that rests on the back of a turtle, and that turtle was on the head of another animal, and things like that. So it takes someone to say, hang on, there are certain observations that I see. For example, when the ship comes into the port, I first see the top part of the ship, then I start to see the other parts of it. So does that indicate that the ship sort of coming along a curved line rather than a flat surface? So that kind of skepticism is extremely important. And we can actually question everything, and then the things that stand questioning, we could probably adopt them and accept them until we find a better mental model. Now, the key thing here is the brain will always think using a mental template. So
Right.
when you break a mental template, you actually replace it with a mental template. So if you think of the mental template that we had, Earth was flat, then we created another one, which is Earth is spherical and round. But we thought that Earth is the center of the universe.
Right.
That's again another wrong mental template that has allowed us to make sense of so many things, yet at the same time, it prevents us from explaining other things in the universe. Then some other person came and questioned that, and then we keep on the scientific discovery going on.
Okay, so this is the CDIO, right? So is that process where the conceive, design, implement, operate?
Yes, when engineers in general, and I believe everyone, because to me, engineering is not really a piece of paper from the university that says that you are an engineer, but it's a way of life and it's a way of thinking. So whenever we have a new idea and we want to bring something new to life, and that's probably the dimension that engineers are good at, they will create products and services. So they will start with conceiving a different world, or conceiving or thinking of a different template, if you would like, for the world. So after that conceiving process, we need now to start designing how would that product or service be, and after that we implement it or make it and eventually operate it. So that's CDIO: conceive, design, implement, then eventually operate.
Okay, so this is something that you can do repeatedly, continuously, changing it.
Actually, this is something that we are doing continuously and repetitively, whether we are aware of it or not.
Okay.
So every time we cook a meal, we need to first think that, I would like to eat that.
Okay.
Then we start thinking of what ingredients will go into this, and probably even write a shopping list if we don't have it. Then eventually have to implement it or cook it, and then eventually have to serve it and wash the dishes. Even if we want to have a different haircut, you have to have the thought first, the new you that you want to see yourself.
Right.
Then you decide what you are going to do about your hair, and eventually you implement it and operate it.
And I guess, today we want to talk about how we can use language to rewire our brains, right? How can we do that based on what we've discussed today?
Yes. I mentioned in the beginning that we have three parts of the brain, the old brain, the middle brain, and the new brain. And both the old brain and the middle brain are incapable of language. They are there just to help us run away from danger. Now, the only part that we can process language in is the neocortex, or the new brain that humans are endowed with. So now imagine if you are facing a difficult situation, a challenging situation, and you have a problem. The problem will really activate your old brain and middle brain very quickly. And the likelihood that you will respond from that point of view is very high. So if you say, let me change the word that I am describing the situation that I am facing from a problem to an opportunity, then straight away you are engaging the part of the brain that works with language, and that is the neocortex. So the neocortex will be puzzled in the beginning. So let's give an example. So let's say I'm running for a meeting, driving, time is really running out, and suddenly my car breaks down. Okay, so clearly I'll be nervous. The old brain is asking, is this bad? Is this going to put me in trouble? Is this a problem? And I could behave in
a reptilian way.
In a reptilian way, exactly. You're exactly right. I may behave in a reptilian way. Now, if I say, no, this is an opportunity. Now I'm engaging the higher, the neocortex, and the neocortex will start to say, what kind of opportunity is this? Because it needs to make sense of the world. And I may say, oh, this is an opportunity for me to see whether Freda will come and pick me up, for example. Let me give her a call because I'm closer to her office, or something like that.
Right.
So there are actually many examples of people who have converted very negative experiences of loss, of having very serious disease, into something that's very positive through saying, oh, this disease was an opportunity for me to find about myself, to find about the important thing for me. But the key thing here is, the first part is when we rename something from a negative name into a positive name, which is an exercise that could literally rewire the brain.
All right. Next week, we'll be discussing creative problem solving. And of course, I've been speaking to Professor Mushtaq Al-Atabi in our Think Like an Engineer series, based on the name of his book. You've been listening to Raise Your Game, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my.